Hello, and welcome back to the Okanagan Reader. I'm your host, Jim Bowering. This video is being recorded on my little old laptop. I tried my phone and found that the camera is probably better than this one, but the audio isn't as good. So now, I'm starting to think about getting a dedicated camera. Any suggestions? In this reading, Elgin begins work on fixing Stanton's ball. He meets his crew and gets things going. He hears about the visitor for the first time. He finds out that it's old hat to the people who've been awake for a while. Stanton and Buzzard take Elgin to an observation bubble in the surface of the comet, and from there he sees the other comet at a great distance. I guess that's about enough for that, getting you prepared for this excellent chapter. In the meantime, how about if you subscribe, or even just like? Liking's easier than subscribing. It's so easy, I just don't know why everybody doesn't do it every single time. Hint. Great big fat juicy hint. Okay, so here we go then.
Chapter 20. Elgin Fixes the Ball. Elgin worked full-time on the ball after that. It was his first big project where he was in charge. Of course, Stanton was still his boss, but he made it clear that he wouldn't interfere. He told Elgin that he would like occasional progress reports, but that he didn't want to hear about any problems. "This is your project, Elgin. Success or failure, you take full credit." Stanton gave him a wicked smile. Try not to disappoint the players or the fans. That gave Elgin a chill. Up to that point it had been an engineering problem to be solved with applied mathematics. Now, suddenly it involved 10,000 people and their feelings about their beautiful flashball arena. He swallowed. Then he nodded. "You got it, boss." He made a decision and a promise. 3 weeks. It'll be done in 3 weeks with no more than 2 days of downtime. Don't make any promises you can't keep. Elgin sensed that Stanton was offering him some advice. "Right," he said. 4 weeks and 4 days. "That's better. People will forgive you if you finish early, but they'll never forget if you finish late." Stanton was satisfied and moved on to the next topic. "Now you're going to need a couple of assistants. I can recommend some if you'd like." "Yes, please," Elgin said. So Stanton lined them up and made the arrangements for them to come over. There was no problem. They simply put what they were doing on hold and came the same day. It was the same with the people who would be fabricating the parts and those who would be assembling them. Even the job of ferrying the big tubes through the corridors had a strong surplus of applicants. Stanton's ball was such an iconic structure that anyone would feel fortunate to have the opportunity to work on it. "A lot of people look up to you, don't they?" said Elgin. Stanton looked at him. "What do you mean?" "Well, look at it. One call from you and everybody is ready to drop everything to work with me." Elgin chuckled. "I'm pretty sure it's not my magnetic personality." Stanton didn't speak, just stared. There was nothing unusual about this situation. When he needed people, he called them, and they came. It just seemed perfectly natural to him. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come on. What do you think would happen if I called them?" "Let's give it a try," said Stanton. "You're going to need finishers to polish the welds and so on. You call them, and we'll see what happens." "Okay." They made the call and got the querulous, harried voice of someone who was obviously in the middle of something. Elgin explained that he needed some finishing work done, and wondered whether they'd be interested. No, he didn't just pull the name out of a hat. He was following a recommendation. Whose recommendation? Elgin couldn't reveal that for the purpose of the experiment, so he simply assured her that it was a hearty endorsement of her abilities, and hoped she'd overlook the lack of an answer to her question. She did, although he could tell that she knew he was being evasive. She finally asked what the job was. "I'm doing some modifications to the flashball court, and I need someone to finish the welds and so on." "The ball? You're changing the ball?" "Yes," said Elgin, "but it's okay. Stanton okayed it." "You're working on Stanton's ball, eh?" She paused for only a second or two. When do you need me?" Elgin explained his planned schedule, with tentative days for the installation of the tubes, whose welds she would be finishing. "But you can come by any time, and I'll be sure to call you in plenty of time when I need you." She made it clear that she would be coming by, and said goodbye. Elgin looked at Stanton and said, "I don't know if that was a promise or a warning." It was both. "Should I be worried?" "Not unless you do something wrong. She's a perfectionist about her own work, which is good for your project, but it carries over to other people's work." Stanton grinned. "She worked for me when we first made the ball." He shook his head at the memory. "It can be hard, but she's the one you want." "I'll take your word for it. And with her on your team, you won't need me looking over your shoulder." "Thanks, I think." "On the other hand, you won't have to worry about the rest of your team either. They won't want to make any mistakes and have her on their case." "That's good." Elgin thought about it. "I wonder why she doesn't just take over and lead the project." "Two reasons. First, this is your project. You're the one who's going to be finding out about himself. Second, she's a perfectionist. The job would never get done." "Oh, I see," said Elgin. "So, did we prove anything?" "Yes. She's coming even though I didn't call her. You hardly even mentioned my name." "That's right, but she only got interested when she found out she'd be working on your ball." "But not that she'd be working for me. There's a difference." "That's true. But I wonder how it would have gone if it was something else. Something that had nothing at all to do with you." Said Stanton. "I see your point. Knowing her, I think she might have just told you to piss off." He nodded, smiling. "Yep, probably in so many words." "So I was right. It's you everyone respects." "I guess you're right," Stanton said in a subdued voice. He roused himself to say, "Get out of here. Get to work before you give me a swelled head." "I'm on my way," said Elgin, leaving Stanton's office. "I'll give you a report every day." He went out into the drafting room to wait for his assistants, and Stanton closed the door behind him. When they arrived, Elgin briefed his new assistants on the project, showing them the plans and his projected timeline. They kept glancing at Stanton's door until he explained the situation to them. Once they realized that Stanton definitely would not be involved, they seemed to resign themselves to accepting Elgin's supervision. The man's name was Van Allen, and the woman's name was Leica. They were both a little younger than Elgin, about their mid-20s. They shared their stories on the way over to the ball, and Elgin was struck by how everyone's paths seemed to share some common steps, even though they were all different. Of course, they had all been rushed along when the need arose to repopulate Yellow Comet, so decisions were somewhat hurried and farewells left feeling incomplete. Maybe that was it. Whatever it was, it gave them a sense of shared history, and made working together just a little easier. Elgin left Leica and Van Allen, call me Van, studying the ball, while he went to talk to the fabricators and assemblers. Now that things were underway, he wanted everyone involved to know what his plans and expectations were. They met at the fabrication rooms, a series of large galleries whose temperatures and air pressures could be controlled as required. Only an hour or so was needed for that, and he left there with the fabricators and assemblers sorting things out between them. He left it up to them to make arrangements with the crew that would be ferrying the pieces, but he called the members of that crew and set a time and place where he could brief them. Back at the ball, he found Van Allen and Leica having an argument. Once he got them settled down, he learned that Van Allen wanted to make some changes to Elgin's plans, and Leica didn't agree. Elgin headed off another flare-up by asking Van to explain his idea. He had to tell Leica to let him talk. She was so vehemently opposed. Van wasn't able to make it very clear, but it was obvious that he thought there was something wrong, and he had an idea of how he would correct it. There wasn't much detail there, but it was enough for Elgin to know it was wrong. He told him so. "How do you know?" asked Van. "You've hardly even looked at my idea." "Shut up, Van," said Leica, adding to Elgin, "He always does this." "I do not." "Yes, you do. You always want to change things, to put your mark on them." "I do not." "Whoa, whoa," said Elgin. Once he got them calmed down, he said to Van, "I wrote these plans myself. They were checked by Buzzard and approved by Stanton. They're good, and we're not changing them." Leica had a triumphant look on her face. "See," she said. Van looked as if he wanted to argue, but the mention of Stanton, and probably also Buzzard, made him think better of it. "Okay," he said, with a hot glance at Leica. "Good," said Elgin. Then he confirmed his authority. "If either of you isn't happy with this assignment, I can get Stanton to recommend someone else." They both reacted strongly. "No," they said almost in unison, followed by alternating bursts. "We love this assignment. Don't get anyone else. We always do this. We like to work together." "Okay, then," Elgin said, "if you're sure." He listened to their earnest assurances. "Good. I'm going to be relying on you to get this done right." They promised, and he went on to tell them what he wanted and what he expected. They would work together and coordinate their activities, but Leica would be his liaison with the fabricators, Van with the assemblers. "I'll want a brief report each morning, and a more complete one each evening. Any problems that you can't resolve between the two of you, bring them to me. Whatever you do, Stanton has told me he doesn't want to hear about it. Is that clear?" They told him it was. Elgin took them on their word and was about to leave when Van said, "Wait." "Yes?" said Elgin, wondering what part of his instructions he could have missed. Van glanced at Leica, who was watching him through narrowed eyes. He said, "You're a new waker, aren't you?" "Yes." Elgin glanced back and forth, wondering what was going on. "Well, have you heard about the visitor yet?" "Shut up," said Leica. "He doesn't want to listen to your gossip." "What gossip? I mean, what visitor?" asked Elgin. Van smirked at Leica and told Elgin all about the mysterious visitor, the blinking light in space, and all the speculation about it. "And no one knows what it is yet?" "No, but everyone's pretty sure it's artificial, mostly because of the coherence of the light. So they sent out a ship to meet it." "Yes," said Van, his eyes bright. "I'd love to be on that ship," he said. Leica was nodding just as bright-eyed. "If I wasn't here, I mean." Elgin left them to their excitement and headed back to the shop, his mind dancing with new energy. When he got there, he found Buzzard deep in his work, so he couldn't talk to him, but Stanton's door was open. He flew straight in this time, no longer hesitant about it, and right across to the desk. "Ah, Elgin," Stanton said, looking up. "How was your first morning as a project leader?" "It was fine. It was great, really." Elgin gave a quick rundown, including a mention of the friction between his assistants. "It's not a problem," he said. "I handled it, and they seem to be getting along okay." Stanton was laughing. "Van and Leica," he said, shaking his head. "They're as compatible as oil and vinegar, aren't they?" "This is normal?" "Yes, they're like that about everything. You think they're fighting, but that's how they work together. Like oil and vinegar, their conflict seems to make them a perfect combination." "They said they like to work together. One of the best teams I have." "Couldn't you have warned me, though?" "What, and missed the chance to test your managerial skills?" "No, it was the perfect opportunity and a safe situation at the same time." As if he hadn't known it before, Elgin realized that this assignment was as much about testing his abilities as it was about modifying the ball. "Well, it worked out okay, I guess." He stored that one away and brought up the topic that was really prodding his curiosity. "Van said something else. What do you know about the visitor?" "The visitor? Wow, I haven't thought about that for ages." "An artificial light that seems to be coming from interstellar space? How can you not think about it?" "Sure, it's amazing, but there hasn't been anything new for months now. We get small bits of information separated by long periods of nothing, and it's been going on for decades." "I can see that, I guess." "It's new for you, though, isn't it?" "Yeah, that must be it," said Elgin. "I guess I got decades of information compressed into a few minutes." "That would make it sound more exciting. Anyway, it's all on record. You can look it up any time." "I'll do that. Meanwhile, if you have some time to spare, there's something I want to show you." Elgin thought about it. "Sure. Things will take care of themselves for a while." "Good. I want to take you to the observation bubble. There's something there you should see." "I'm going. I'm done. I'm going to the bubble too," came a shout from the outer office. Obviously Buzzard overheard. Stanton grinned. "Of course, Buzzard," he called. "You're coming." That was the plan. He led Elgin out. Whenever you're ready, Buzzard. I'm ready now. Done already. Buzzard straightened his papers one last time and came away from the table. Once through the square and into the corridors, they quickly got into territory Elgin had never seen before. He got the sense that they were going up. It wasn't something he could tell from gravity, but by the convention of up and down in construction. He knew they were heading for the surface. It didn't take long. It couldn't have been more than a few hundred meters, a kilometer at most, to the top level. Once there, they were in smaller corridors finished only as much as required by utility. The lighting was lower, too. Dimmer than the dull yellow to orange Elgin was accustomed to, the light was reddish. He could feel his pupils dilating. It was obvious that these corridors were among the first ever made. They were probably dug when Green Comet was first inhabited, or even by the advanced crew that prepared it before the general population arrived. They were built well. Elgin had no problem with the engineering, but they had a rough and ready feel to them, and the surfaces had unattended scrapes and gouges in them. These corridors were made when there was no time for the niceties. They didn't prepare him for the observation bubble. The three of them arrived at a modest little door, which Stanton opened, standing back to allow Elgin to go through first. It was even darker on the other side of the door, so it took a moment for Elgin to see where he was. He gasped and recoiled when he saw the stars. It looked as if he had just flown out onto the surface of the comet, and his instinct was to get back through the door to safety. His way was blocked, though, by Buzzard and Stanton following him out, so he calmed down. "The bubble," said Buzzard. "Observation bubble. Stanton's bubble." Elgin looked at Stanton, who nodded. "So," he said, his voice quivering with his racing heart, "you took what you learned here and applied it to the ball?" "That's right. It took a while to work out the techniques like building up the shell with vapor deposition, but once we had them it was just a matter of scaling them up." Elgin could see that this was a scaled-down version of the big ice sphere he was working on. It was as if they were inside a transparent ball that was half embedded in the surface of the comet. Its diameter was only a fraction of the flashball court, though. It was only about 15 meters across. As his eyes continued to adjust, he could see starlight reflecting off the back wall, enough to give him a good sense of its size. Finally, he got up the courage to look outward again. It was beautiful. Now that he was no longer scared to death, he was able to appreciate that. The ice shell of the bubble was flawlessly clear, perfectly transmitting the frigid fire of the distant stars. Elgin felt a swelling in his solar plexus, a powerful yearning for what he was seeing. He took it all in, marveling at the jewel-like glitter of star clusters, noting how the dark shadows of dust clouds helped to define the limbs of the galaxy. Stanton just let him look. Even Buzzard was quiet. They knew from their own experiences that he was best off trying to absorb it on his own. Finally, Elgin drew a deep breath, a huge sigh, that returned him to his surroundings as well as replenishing his oxygen. He felt as if he'd been holding his breath. He pulled his eyes away and looked at his companions, who he could now make out in the starlight. "This is fantastic," he said. "Thank you for bringing me here." "My pleasure," said Stanton. "My pleasure," said Buzzard. "Pleasure." "We didn't just bring you here to look at the stars, though," said Stanton. "Look over there to the right." Elgin did as he was told, but he couldn't see anything. He persisted, though, opening his gaze and trying to relax and let whatever it was resolve itself. He was about to give up when he suddenly realized that there was something he wasn't seeing. There was a small spot on the star field that had no stars. He knew what it was right away. "The other comet," he said. "That's right," said Stanton, very pleased. "Elgin knows," said Buzzard. "Elgin knows." "How far away is it?" "About 100,000 clicks," said Stanton. "Right?" he asked Buzzard. "F.A.," said Buzzard. "F.A." "We're closing at around 3 meters per second right now. Over the next few years, we'll be gradually reducing that to 0. That's when we'll be joining them, in a few years?" "Yes, just a little less than 3 years." Elgin was staring at the spot, trying to draw out some details, but the best he could do was a faint glow. It could just as easily be his mind filling it in as something actually visible. Should I be able to see it, he asked. I mean, not just where it occludes the background stars, but light reflecting from it? Good eye, said Stanton. This far out, the sun's not giving us much more light than any other star, so it's right on the edge of visibility, the sort of thing where it's better if you don't look directly at it. That's it, exactly. It's frustrating. If I look right at it, it disappears. Here, watch this. Stanton pushed a button on a small device he had in his hand. After a few seconds, a flashing light appeared in the tiny disk of the comet. It flashed a short pattern, then changed from white to red and flashed another pattern. It did the same thing for orange, yellow, and green, then did white again, then stopped. Buzzard laughed with joy and did 2 turns around the bubble before returning to Stanton's side. Stanton was grinning. Elgin said, "You've installed a light show over there?" "There are people over there. We use the lights to monitor our progress." "I should have known," said Elgin. "I set this up in advance," said Stanton. "When they got my signal, they turned on the lights." "What about the patterns?" asked Elgin. "I got the colors for the 4 comets, but what did the patterns mean?" "I don't know," said Stanton. "I left that up to them." "Intervals," said Buzzard. "Time intervals, times." They just looked at him and waited. "Times of the comets, times of capture, times of orbits, periods." Stanton and Elgin both nodded. "Did they tell you that?" asked the older man. "No," said Buzzard. "It was just there, just there." He wasn't insulted by the question. "Of course it was," said Stanton. "Well, if everyone's seen enough, we should get back." "Seen enough, get back," said Buzzard, heading for the door. Elgin hesitated, and Stanton waited. Buzzard stopped and turned. "I'm coming," Elgin said. "I just want to take one last look." It was, after all, probably the most splendid thing he had ever seen. "Take your time," said Stanton. "You can stay as long as you want. If we have to leave, I'm sure you can find your own way back." "No, I'm coming," said Elgin, backing toward the door. There was something terribly compelling about the frosty glitter and the impossibly deep black. Stanton took his arm and guided him through the door. "You can come back any time. It will always be there." When the door closed, Elgin was struck by how dull and prosaic the hallway looked in the dim red lighting. Then he laughed at himself. "What?" asked Stanton. "Nothing, really. I just noticed how boring it is in here compared to out there." "So? Well, boring? Living in a comet?" Stanton laughed, and Buzzard joined in. "Come to think of it," he said, "I've become blasé about it, too." "Me too," said Buzzard, "blasé." They all laughed as they headed back down to the lower levels, where people were going about their business as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Stanton and Buzzard went back to the shop, and Elgin headed for the ball to check in on Van and Laika. He found them there with a 3rd person. As he approached, Elgin could see that she was an older woman, about Stanton's age, he guessed, very attractive but hard-looking somehow. She was talking to his 2 assistants, and when they spotted him coming, they quickly pointed him out to her. She turned, and Elgin could see that she was indeed very good-looking, but her features were marred by a dour expression, and her eyes were sharp and probing. "Where have you been?" she asked. "This is Galatea," said Laika. "The finisher," added Van. "We were trying to tell her, but she wanted to see you." "Well," said Galatea, "where were you?" Elgin could tell that it would be best to just get to the point and forget about the social preamble. "Stanton took me to the bubble. Buzzard came, too." "Ah, showing you the sights, eh? Maybe showing off, too?" "More of the former, I think." "Yes, Stanton the humble, that's our Stanton." She got momentarily lost in her thoughts, but not for long. "So he's letting you practice on this, eh?" She swung her chin to indicate the ball. "Well, I don't know if it's using his ball rather than risk something vital." "Well, and then he'll know if he can take off the training wheels, eh?" Elgin stopped trying to respond. What she was saying was quite blunt, but it was uncomfortably close to what he was thinking himself. He decided to let her carry on until she finished what she had to say, then to play it by ear from there. She told him how it would be. She would be in personally on the 2 installation days to do the finishing on the joints between the tubes and the ball. In the meantime, she would bring a crew in to refinish the shell. "It's a mess," she said, "a complete mess." They couldn't see anything wrong with it, but she was disgusted. "People have been touching it." Elgin was about to point out that having people touch it was inevitable, even desirable, but he caught himself in time. Galatea went on for a short while longer before she announced that she had work to do and couldn't hang around listening to their idle chatter any more. They watched her fly to the entrance, shaking her head and muttering. She stopped there and closely examined some flaw before she went out and flew away. Elgin imagined he could still feel her disapproval echoing out of the corridor as she went. He was glad that Stanton had warned him, but the actual experience was still breathtaking. "So that's he tried, forgetting the rest of her name. "Galatea," Van and Lecca harmonized. "Galatea." Elgin couldn't think of anything else to say. "She's okay once you get to know her," offered Lecca. "Yeah," said Van. "She's nice once you get past that. She was just nervous, meeting you for the first time." "She was nervous?" Elgin had some difficulty imagining that Galatea could have been as nervous as he was. He filed it for later, and got the first daily report from his assistants. Satisfied that all was well, he told them to come back in the morning and set out for his last meeting of the day. It was quite a relief to meet the ferry crew. There was no drama there. They were refreshingly laconic to the point of phlegmatic. "Let us know when it's ready," they said, "and we'll move it." On that happy note, Elgin called it a day.